right, yeah, thanks everyone, good afternoon. So once again, I am AC Charania, and today I'm going to be talking about Generation Orbit Launch Services, Inc. So we have started this company to send the next generation of payloads to orbit. And in some sense, how are we going to do that? I think in this way we're doing it faster, and thus Generation Orbit, or GO, as we will call it, is trying to develop a new nano-satellite-based system utilizing air launch, utilizing some of our existing partners to develop an actionable service for military, civil, commercial, academic, and international customers. So our system itself we call Go Launcher, which is the name of the general system of an air-launched rocket. And so we are looking at a rocket, as you can see, from an existing aircraft, civilian or ex-military, to give you the range flexibility, operational flexibility for a responsive, small capability. As you saw yesterday, under the guise of SpaceWorks, one of the company behind Generation Orbit that founded this company, we have been doing the market assessments and the technical analysis and the partnership development. And as you saw yesterday with the market assessment, we've been looking at current projections. We've been slicing and dicing kind of the customer base. We've been looking at specifics of who exactly would be our customers. And we've identified several folks within the government, within academia, within commercial industry, and internationally that are within these bands of customers. So we see a growing market. We see innovation happening in this market. We see kind of an ecosystem emerging of suppliers, developers, customers, and applications, and that gives us confidence. In some sense, if I'm developing a launch vehicle, I'm looking for maybe new applications, growth, and a large satellite side, thousands of pounds in terms of those satellites. Those are, in some sense, few and far between. Applications being injected into those systems, which may last 15 years, are slightly slower. In this arena, application and technology infusion is happening faster. One of the things also on launch vehicles generally I would classify as important is rate, launch rate, both in terms of getting the average price per flight down, but also the operational experience. And the grand promises of large launch rates on the large satellite side have not kind of emerged. So you may get 30 to 70 launches per year, and that's maybe that kind of flat. But in this sense, maybe we can take advantage of this idea of rate, both in terms of learning to produce more units, but also learning in terms of operations. So in some sense, the background to the company is we are seeing a growing market wave. We see standards, we see new developers, we see an ecosystem, but we see bottlenecks within the process of getting to space for these new applications and new developers. So once you build a satellite, it might take a year or 2 years to get into space without a dedicated launch option. And if you want to do rapid development cycles, maybe you need a rapid launch cycle. We also foresee that if all these other ground-launched rocket systems are successful, such as Orbital Sciences Taurus 2, SpaceX Falcon 9, and others, the ranges will be very difficult places to operate because you have multi-billion-dollar assets sitting on pads that are locking down that pad. Locking down that entire range for good reason. As a U.S. taxpayer, I'm glad the Air Force is locking down that range for a $700 million satellite for our country. But in some sense, how do you get around that? And so in that sense, that is the approach we've taken with air launch, using an aircraft. We also see the background to this with the shuttle retiring, with commercial space emerging, that federal and state governments desire new commercial space projects. Generation Orbit has offices in Georgia and Washington, D.C. SpaceWorks, the founding company of Generation Orbit, has been in Georgia for about 11 years. So we have very good connections within the state of Georgia, and thus the state has been supportive, and hopefully will be supportive as we go forward with our venture. And the final thing we see is, given budgets and this general situation, that will require, in terms of the government side and helping nascent industries and developers, will require innovative partnerships in projects with low development risks. So that is informing us in terms of our development process of reducing development cost. So the generation orbit GO philosophy is the following: your orbit on time, to examine the entire chain to get you to orbit, to reduce that to about 3 months. So in the sense of, I do have a launch operator license, I have identified the range, you can give certain parameters to AST about the payload, so the payload review process can be reduced. And to get that time when somebody knocks on my door and puts down the initial 20 to 50% deposit, to get them to space in 3 months if their satellite is ready, and if they are informed of the integration process. Our vision is to use air launch. You know, we are not a ground launched company. The vision of this, our specialization, as was talked about earlier, is air launch. The customers include industry, NASA, ORS, Army SMDC, AFRL, DARPA, academia, and folks, and various groups within that, NRL, etc. And one of the things we think is important is to have a near-term viable system, and we call that Go Launcher 1, or Go 1. The development philosophy is a loose requirements process, in the sense that this is not a NASA or hopefully Air Force defined process of, you need to get me, you know, 35.1 kilograms to LEO at this inclination and this altitude. You know, with the vision is to develop a capability and put that out into the marketplace, the government marketplace, the commercial marketplace, and see, does this have a use? And we believe it does. Use existing assets, low capital costs, leverage what some of our rocket partners are already doing. Air launch for range flexibility. Some of the founders of GO and the entities involved with Generation Orbit have experience in air launch and aircraft, etc. Leverage domestic partnerships. Hopefully in the next few months I can publicly announce some additional partnerships officially on various areas, and also potential international partnerships. The principles of the company, who are the folks behind this? So myself, the Chief Executive Officer, 11 years at SpaceWorks dealing with technologies, launch vehicles, commercial development. My Chief Technical Officer, Dr. Brad St. Germain, expertise in performance analysis, vehicle sizing, worked on several related projects, currently working on the RBS Pathfinder project, which is a $50 million next generation X vehicle to go to Mach 5 for AFRL. Our Director of Flight Systems, Jeff Stivers, kind of our top gun. We've got kind of partner companies, and so Jeff and his folks have experience in multiple types of aircraft for both commercial and military customers, both in terms of operations, tactics, and also refurbishment and operations. On the strategic business side, Sterling Wharton, he's based in Atlanta. He's got a lot of expertise in new ventures, was the entrepreneur in residence at Georgia Tech's incubator called ATDC, and the chairman of the board, John Olds, founder of SpaceWorks. This is kind of the team, and so kind of laying out, and you can't really read this, but basically it's a lot of folks, myself, Brad, John, Jeff Stivers, and some of the folks at SpaceWorks. We've got a board of directors, board of advisors, and for you folks, I would also, maybe in terms of giving advice, something else you may also want to think about is, yes, you may be the officer of the company, but you may also want to have a board of advisors, an advisory board that helps you.
Yes, we do that.
Right, so yes, a lot of people do that. We have legal counsel, both a corporate legal counsel and a specific ITAR legal counsel, and also intellectual property legal counsel. And then hopefully in the next few months, we're currently working technically with specific partners on the rocket side, composite structures, adaptive guidance, navigation controls, and pylons that hopefully I can announce that we're working with. So who are we? So SpaceWorks, I went over this a little bit yesterday, but something else I would put out there is SpaceWorks is also there to help you. You know, I am talking about generational orbit, but in some sense, SpaceWorks is also there as, you know, Will is indicated in terms of you folks to help you. You know, SpaceWorks does 3 and 6 degree of freedom trajectory simulation, separation analysis, internal CFD, some initial finite element, weights and sizing, CAD, cost, operation, safety assessments, and we have folks on board who have some experience in FAA launch licensing and those kinds of things. So all those areas, and if you need animations, illustrations, we have 2 full-time in-house space artists who do animation, illustrations, etc. So both the engineering analysis, the design, and the marketing, and the business assessments, and some of the legal regulatory things we can also help folks on. So I would offer that. TAC Air, which is our flight systems partner, they're also a small business, and one of our visions is have a consortium of small, dedicated folks, not have small companies and large companies in some sense, but we're looking for specific small companies that can be fast acting and work with us. And TAC Air is one of those folks, and they have operational experience. They have several top guns on board. Combined, they have several thousand carrier landings from the folks on board, and they have various facilities. And this is some of our folks on the Su-27 Sukhoi airplane from the Ukraine, which might be one of the options for us. But these guys at TAC Air have the experience of flying this plane, helping to refurbish this plane and bring it into the country. So beyond this plane, the other planes that you'll see that we're looking at, TAC Air has some flight systems experience. Folks at Generation Orbit have experience in small satellite launch. This is not something we're, just thought of and boom, we started the company. We've been thinking about this for more than a decade. From internal studies for NASA, for internal studies for RASC, for DARPA, and for other things. And we determined that this was the appropriate time to form the company to develop such a system, an air launch system. That is our specialty, air launch. In 2004, we were involved with the DARPA Rascal project, which was a project to develop an air launch system, 100+ pounds to LEO, using some advanced technologies. We were on the team that was proposing to use the F-14 back then with an X-core-based liquid rocket stage. The other team DARPA went forward with, which was going to build a brand new Mach 3 airplane, and then DARPA canceled the project for various reasons, because one didn't have enough money. So, but yeah, we have been interested in this area, and most recently we were involved. SpaceWorks, the founding company, was involved in the DARPA NASA horizontal launch study, looking at small and large air launch. And I think we are well positioned to take advantage of the growth in the commercial market, in the marketplace, and then also interest on the commercial and government side. Product line structure, I think 2 product lines, Go Launcher 1 and Go Launcher 2. We say Go, we call them Go 1 and Go 2. Go 1 is that near-term demonstrator to give us the operational experience. And I would say in some sense, not to discount the rocket engineering, but the rocket side for us is not trivial, but it doesn't keep me awake at night. We've got solid liquid hybrid rockets we're examining and potential partnerships in all those areas. And I think those folks can do it. But what keeps me up at night is the aircraft certification and the FAA certification, beyond raising money, obviously. Those things do not scale one-to-one with the gross liftoff mass of your rocket. You still have to get an AST license, you still have to work with the range, you still have to get a flight termination system. All those things make this a more systems integration process versus just designing the most optimized in terms of structural mass fraction or ISP rocket. That is a concern, but in terms of getting low-cost rockets, low-cost system, a lot of things are involved with that. So Go 1 is kind of a near-term demonstrator to low Earth orbit. The kind of initial target is 110 kilograms, 250 kilometer circular, launching from an eastern range. We're looking at various aircraft and maybe 3 to 4 stage, mostly solid rocket. And that's important to give us this operational experience, but the real system we believe which would be appropriate is Go Launcher 2 or Go 2, which would be 20 to 30 kilograms to low Earth orbit, 450 kilometer circular, because we think that is a place where customers will pay a dedicated launch price. And something to publicly say is this system will not be cheaper than anything currently existing on a dollars per kilogram basis. Because I would argue this is not the same exact service. The quality of service of this system, of a dedicated air launch system, is slightly different than a secondary payload. And thus what I'm offering, the product in the marketplace, is slightly different. So I'm not competing on price. That is not our goal. I believe that I can generate sufficient customers at current SpaceX 1 kilogram secondary payload prices to make this slightly viable. It depends on a lot of factors in terms of the rocket and the range costs and other things and flight termination system costs. But that's the vision, that actually a lot of people are focused on price, and yes, that is important, but hopefully it's a slightly different quality of service. We're also looking at various launch sites, and hopefully we'll make a decision in the next few months on that. But this is kind of a notional 3-degree of freedom trajectory launching from NASA Wallops. And so we're looking at various aircraft options of the F-15D, F-4, Su-27, and G-2, G-3. And we've identified avenues of acquiring those aircraft and refurbishing them if needed, and modifying them for our options. And hopefully, within about 2 or 3 months, I can be more public about actually more specifics on that investigation, and also more specifics on the rocket partners as we can publicly announce them. But and this is kind of a notional roadmap, general roadmap of kind of what we see of this Go-1 minimal viable system for orbit, and leveraging that for Go-2. And you know, I'm not here to officially say we are in the challenge, because we are not, but we're thinking about it. You know, what will inform our decision will be the rules, as the allied organization and NASA work on those, and that how those rules are written will definitely impact our entry into the challenge with the Go-1 system. But in some sense, as you know, Sam and Larry had alluded to, actually, to be perfectly honest, this thing of someone coming in, developing something for the challenge and moving on, that unfortunately is our roadmap. You know, that we are focused on 20 to 30 kilograms at a slightly different orbit, but maybe on the roadmap, working on the challenge would help us get there. You know, in the sense of maybe not even winning the challenge would help us regardless for our eventual roadmap. So I think we're still examining personally entering the challenge with the Go-1 system, and may or may not. But I think our long-term goal, operational goal, is this 20 to 30 kilogram at 450 kilometer circular orbit. So, yeah. So, kind of in a nutshell, that's Generation Orbit. Hopefully in the next few months I can have more details on some of the partnerships. We're still going through some of the technical trades with rocket providers. And something else I would say that was mentioned earlier today is in terms of specialization. You know, I would say our goal is not to have the best solid rocket, not to have the best liquid rocket, not to have the best hybrid rocket, but to have the best air launch solution. So in some sense, we could be open to other rocket solutions that would like to launch on this particular platform, the platform we have, you know, and have, for instance, an open, a relatively open pylon standard, for instance, that would attach to our airplane, you know. And something else to keep in mind of on the FAA side is that the FAA has a thing called a safety approval. And so what you can actually do is, let's say your system is 30% complete and you've got 70% left. What you can actually go do is have a discussion with the FAA and talk to them about the 30% complete portion of your system. Maybe it's the first stage is complete. Well, you can go and do a safety approval where you give them a lot of information on that first stage, and thus they understand that. So then when you go for your orbital launch license, they already understand that first stage, and your orbital launch license might take you a little less time. And that would be actually a model we could do, for instance, like we go for a safety approval for our aircraft, our pylon, our operational system, and we get that, and then you can come in with your rocket, potentially, this is thinking out loud here, and thus, since we have already gone through the safety approval process, when you go for a full orbital license, you know, you're piggybacking on our safety approval, for instance, for our system and our pylon, et cetera. So those are, just thinking out of the box, some things that could potentially happen in the future. But I think we have identified some baseline solutions for the rockets, and hopefully we'll have partnerships there. But we still potentially could be open as we go forward for working with others at some point. But our focus is on air launch, and that is kind of our specialization here for Generation Orbit. So, all right.